Welcome, everybody. Exciting to have you here today. This is something that everyone on this panel really enjoys doing. These charrettes are, to me, kind of a passion with sustainable design and something I've been doing for the last 20 years. Don't do the math on how old I am, but we all really enjoy this integrated process and what comes of it. So we're here to have some fun, kind of share experiences, and show you some great tools that we all use in this charrette process. So to start that off, this is a very interactive type of meeting. When you're actually on a project, we're going to try to kind of engage you along the way as much as we can. To start with, I've been doing these for 10 years previous to this in person, but virtually there's all these great tools. So we're using Zoom, there's breakout rooms. We're going to introduce Miro, Menti, other tools, but the chat is a great opportunity just for you guys to input some ideas along the way. So as a Kickstarter, love to see some comments in the chat about your experience with charrettes. Have you experienced them before? What type of projects? Do you have any complaints, pros, cons, things you liked about them, tools you like, things you didn't, exercises you like, things you thought that weren't the best use of time? That's what this is all about. That's what's so fun about these meetings is everything gets to go on the table, no wrong answers.
I think you have to
for everyone.
change it to here.
And I will pass the baton to Ellen. There's a little background noise, but it hasn't been too much, but somebody might have a little something in the background. But Ellen, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, thank you, Summer, and thank you for that nice welcome. So as presenters today, we're going to look forward to seeing your comments pop up in the chat. So again, if folks maybe could mute, that would be great. Or Kathy, maybe you could mute folks that are not presenters. So feel free to type stuff in the chat. We'll be looking at that throughout the session today. So I'm Ellen Shepard. I'm an outreach manager with Energy Trust of Oregon New Buildings Program, and I am on the AIA Coat Board, and I am the lead for the digital design series for that group. So I wanted to just take a moment and welcome you to the session today. And here's the technology recommendations. We want to keep those muted, keep everything muted unless you're actively talking. And if there's an opportunity to have anyone speaking at any point, you want to that would be the time to unmute. We recommend having speaker view so that you can really see the slides and the speakers. And then just a note that this session is being recorded, so just heads up. So next slide, please. So, AIA Oregon does have some community agreements, and this is something that we hold as a key part of what we like to be a part of out in the community. We want to ensure that the culture is respectful and comfortable, curious, inclusive, and kind. And I'll just take a moment and let you guys read some of these other agreements here that we have today as a community in this meeting. And frankly, these are all great. I think Summer would agree for charrettes. A lot of these are kind of good thoughts for all meetings. All right, thank you. Next slide, please. All right, and this session does qualify for 1 hour of continuing ed credit, HSW, for AIA. So definitely please make sure that we get your information if you'd like to seek credit for this session. Okay, one more, please. I think there's one last one. Thank you. And then these are just the learning objectives for the continuing education for today's session. I'm not going to read all this to you, but I did want you to see that we do have those learning objectives available. And if you'd like to see them later, we can send them to you. All right, so thank you so much. I think that was it for kind of our opening. And with that, I will hand it over to Heather. Heather's kind of driving us here through Miro, and she's gonna kick us off for the mock charrette.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to back up and let you see all of the guts behind this presentation in Miro. And we're only going to use this for the first part of it, but we wanted to really share it as a great tool. As Summer mentioned, this is something that really kind of took off during virtual times of COVID, and it has become such an incredible tool that we like to use it in fully virtual sessions, hybrid sessions, even in-person sessions when it's applicable. And so this is just an example of one kind of a layout that we've used before, where we have a agenda. And so this is an example of a typical agenda we would use for a sustainability charrette, maybe even more holistic than the energy focus that's today. And so you'll see in this that some things are grayed out. That's because we don't have time to do that today, but it's just an example of what a larger charrette would look like, where we might actually have breakout sessions and have some more interactive activities than we have time for today. And links to other Miro boards when people actually want to get in and use different ones during those breakout sessions. We have activities sometimes to get people used to Miro if they haven't done it before. We try to keep it simple when we're actually involving other people, all of the participants in a charrette. And so again, just some examples of how you can just quickly show the people how to use a sticky tool, a sticky note rather, so that they don't have to know everything, but if they can just take a sticky note and write on it and say their name, that's a good way to get them introduced. Then the next thing I wanted to show you, we're going to share this after the session today. So we're working on a workshop planning resources area. If any more come out today, we're going to add to this. But wanted to make sure that you knew this was there. We have how to run a great workshop, 37 tips and ideas, a really great article from Building Green, tools like this and some of the polling tools that we'll mention later, tools from Energy Trust of Oregon, some free analysis tools that we'll mention throughout the day, complementary rating systems, and some examples of reports that would be typical of a energy charrette. Yeah, so that's basically it on Miro. So I guess I'll jump back into, well, let's look at the agenda real quick. So this is the agenda for the rest of the afternoon. We have our introductory time, which is now, including going into owner project goals, a project overview, and Energy Trust of Oregon overview from Ellen. And then we'll jump into the topic. So we'll have energy and carbon, which will be the focus today. We'll have a presentation, we'll have some discussion and some exercises. We'll hit on some indoor environmental quality towards the end, and site and water. And then the last half hour, we're going to talk about goal setting and really open it up to the audience to ask us questions. And then we'll wrap up with some key takeaways. All right, so we're going to jump back into presenting. And I'm going to hand this over to, oh, wait, we're supposed to introduce ourselves. Forgot about that part. So I think we're each playing a role today. And since I'm already talking, I'll do that. And then I'll hand it over to everyone. I'll pass it off to some other folks. I'm Heather DeGrella. I'm Director of Sustainability at Office Architecture. So I'm often in the facilitator role that Summer's playing today. So today, my role is to play the role of the architect. Brian, I see you on my screen, so I'm going to hand it over to you.
Sounds good. Yeah, Brian Butler with Aris Consulting, and I'll be playing the mechanical engineer and energy analyst today. I'll pass it to, I guess, Ellen's next.
Hi there. Yeah, I introduced myself already. I'm Ellen with Energy Trust of Oregon, and I'm often a facilitator or a participant, but today I get to just be a participant, and I'll be representing Energy Trust and kind of our part of the charrette process. So I will hand it off to Nathan.
Thank you, Ellen. I am Nathan Ehring. I am representing the third-party building commissioning provider for this project and work with Elevate Building Commissioning. I will pass it on to Joe.
All right, thank you, Nathan. I'm Joe Mazzarella. I'm with Sunlight Solar Energy. We're out of Bend, Oregon. I'm representing the Solar Trade Ally in this charrette. And I guess I'm not sure who I need to pass it off to be honest.
Hey, thanks a lot, Joe.
Oh, Eric, maybe Eric.
Yeah, I can go. Hi, everybody. My name's Eric Wynn. I work for Multnomah County, Oregon as their energy manager. And today I'll be representing the owner's perspective in the mock charrette.
And how about Kriya?
Hi, Kriya Caping, and I on the new buildings, Energy Trust new buildings team. I'm the training and education specialist, but for this, I will be representing Ellen's trusty assistant from Energy Trust, willing to take any notes and support the charrette in any way.
Thanks. And Summer, I think you're our last rep, and then we'll hand it back over to Eric to kick off the charrette.
Oh, did we lose Summer?
She may have had to step away for a minute.
She may have.
So
Well,
Eric, if you want to just go ahead and get rolling.
Absolutely. Yeah, we did have an opportunity to meet Summer a little bit earlier. But again, I'm Eric Wynn, the energy manager for Multnomah County. And from the owner's perspective, at Multnomah County, we're very fortunate to have a coordinated strategic planning process for our facilities portfolio. So we're consistently looking about 5 to 10 years out for opportunities to serve the public better. And for the site, we identified a need to serve people in our community that may have a need for navigating social services, housing issues, or career opportunities. We knew geographically that we wanted a location for our neighbors in North Portland and located near mass transit. So at this time in the project, we're a few years into developing the concept. We've acquired the site, we've determined the financing and contracted for our design team. Many of the people you will meet today are representing people on that design team. We've engaged with the Energy Trust of Oregon's new buildings program and enrolled the project. I view the early design assistance charrette as my first opportunity to assemble my team to discuss major project goals and expectations. As such, I've invited representatives from multiple contracted firms, county employees in our trades and project management teams, and stakeholders who will eventually be operating the structure. So in terms of project goals, it's very important to have corporate policy outlining the desired outcomes for the project. For Multnomah County, our strategic planning process incorporates a green buildings policy that helps guide our scoping process from the very beginning. So first and foremost, the facility must function to serve the people who will be receiving services and our employees who will be working there. As we are doing that, the design team is challenged to make the facility operate as efficiently as possible. And so the project begins with goals that say that new construction is designed for a minimum 50-year lifespan. There should be a life cycle cost analysis performed, and all major building elements related to high performance green buildings are evaluated. It should strive to achieve LEED Gold as a minimum for new construction. The project must support building use for operating programs and environmental concerns. It should achieve AIA 2030 carbon emission reduction goals, which, as we know, is 80% below US average for that building type. And it should achieve LEED Gold, or at least 7 LEED energy credits, or more than 30% above Oregon code. So with that, this is an opportunity for everybody to collaborate on my team, come up with ideas and discuss things that maybe excites them, things that they expect to have as they operate the buildings, and or things that are absolutely not tolerable as we design the building. So from that, we go to Heather, and Heather can kick off some of the more project specific details.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I'm going to start off with just sharing some analysis, some preliminary analysis that we've done on the site, and some background information on the program and operation hours so that we have some good information to work with today as we're talking through some of these issues. And so we can see from the site that the building is, unfortunately, the axis is the long way north-south. And so we don't have the most ideal exposure. So that's something we want to keep in mind. Our exposure to the south and north is minimized. We do know which way the winds come from in the summer and winter. So we have some prevailing summer winds coming from the south west, and we have some prevailing winter winds coming from the northeast. And then thinking a little bit more about the vegetation on the site and the context around the building, we've got some areas that are sunny and exposed. We have some areas that are open but protected from the proposed planting of the trees or existing trees. And then we have some areas on the outside that are more shady and cool. We also know that there's an average of 40 inches of rain per year on this site. So that could be some opportunities. It could also be some
I'll talk to Joe. I got it.
That we need to deal with.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Heather. I would just chime in. That's definitely something we like to look at from a mechanical standpoint, looking at shading, where we have it, where we don't, how that could affect heating and cooling loads. And then, the rainfall, of course, too, if we want to look at potentially analyzing a rainwater harvesting system for non-potable water uses.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, and then so we're just going to look at the floor plan. Our program is the good portion of the building is actually a dormitory, a shared dormitory. Then we have a number of offices throughout. We have some private showers and restrooms, and we have a commons area. We also have kitchens, a kitchen, which we know can be a big energy user, and a laundry area. And then also one really special thing or thing to note about this project is the hours of operations are 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And it's really important to understand those hours of operations. I know in the past when we've gone back and looked at a project after it's been built and it's using more energy than expected, a lot of times we can trace some of that misalignment with the design phase predictions having to do with the project being operated more than we ever expected.
So Heather, in that kitchen, is that a full service kitchen, or is that more of kind of a warming kitchen? Can you expand a little bit? Because Energy Trust does have incentives for appliances. So just kind of thinking through where we might connect in there.
Sure, and I might throw this back to Eric. We're still working through some of the programming, so I'm not sure where we landed with that.
Yeah, we did have a full service kitchen in there. Some of the occupants are able to use it. Cooking food is especially important at this facility.
Excellent. So Brian, is that something that since you're wearing both hats of normally we would have a separate energy modeler,
Right.
she wasn't able to join us today, but wearing your energy modeler hat, that's something that you'll want to adjust in your model. And can you talk a little bit about how the hours of operation might impact the modeling effort?
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, understanding the schedule, the accurate schedule up front is really helpful for us. A building like this with a kitchen that's a pretty high intensity energy use, that's going to have a pretty good impact on the project. So understanding that up front, what's going to be in there and how that's going to be used is very helpful for us.
Great, thank you.
All right, I wanted to check and see if Summer has had a chance to get back on. I think I saw an email pop up. She might have been having technical problems.
Yeah, it looks like she might be back online. So Summer, are you here with us? I see her here. So there's a question. We could probably jump to that while we're kind of waiting for Summer to jump back in about I think maybe this is for you, Eric. where it says from James mentioned the building is not oriented correctly. How did that happen? Is it a new building? Was it an existing building?
For this site, it was an existing building that we're tearing down to the studs and remodeling. So the site orientation was specific to the piece of property and also the frame of the building.
Great, thanks. And I see Summer, yay.
I have a question. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, hi everybody. Hey, I have a quick question, particularly when I hear that the building is perhaps going to be demoed or brought down to studs. And I don't know the exact program requirements in terms of the square footage, but can the upper floor be oriented east-west to get the maximum benefit and have the stills for parking or anything else?
I'm sorry, Vijay, I couldn't understand your question. Did you say that we could try to orient the top floor for what?
Yeah, if the program square footage allows you to have another story up above, then can the upper floor be oriented, the opposite way to harness the natural energy with the orientation part?
That's a great question. So as I'm working through a process, we have a lot of opportunities ahead of us. And I really want to put the challenge to this design team to think through those kind of opportunities and how we might be able to achieve that within the constraints of the budget.
It's a great thought, VJ. I think that's, thinking outside the box, when you have constraints of, the site and the orientation of the building, but if we could have had a second story on the building, if that was something that was allowable, allowing for, studies, which ETO incentivizes for computational fluid dynamics, for natural ventilation, could that, be oriented differently, and that daylight, doing studies for that. There's actually great incentives through Energy Trust in the early design process for that, covering 60% of that cost. So I think that would be something that'd be great to analyze, like our owner representative Eric mentioned, if the budget and program allowed. That's a great point, VJ. That's exactly how you want to be thinking in these types of meetings. Thank you so much.
Excellent. So Summer, are you able to share your screen and we can keep moving?
Absolutely. Pull things back up. I could totally reboot. I'm glad this didn't happen to everybody. My computer started screaming at me, froze. And it's funny. Ellen, do you remember this? This might be karma. I said, if some technical difficulty happens, this will be good for people to see in live time. What we have to do. Surely it won't happen to us pros, but if it happened, and here we go. The facilitator has a total reboot. Sorry, guys. I am back. I had quite a few things pulled up, which may have been part of the problem for questions after. So those are no longer up, but we'll free flow it. The PowerPoint is up. That is all that matters. Let me share my screen.
Thank you. And some are so right. All of these meetings, particularly now that we're doing so many online, we used to have more of these in person. And I would actually be interested if anyone wants to comment in the chat, kind of your thoughts about in-person versus virtual, if you have experience with these meetings, and kind of any thoughts you have on that. But yeah, definitely the online ones, if we have a system issue, then that can delay us a bit. Yeah.
It can happen, but it's real life. Okay. So I will kick things off a little bit again. I'm sure there was a great intro. Thank you, Heather. This is kind of a fun intro slide, and quick background on this. This is just kind of a general way to kickstart looking at this whole building design. Really, we're looking at the building as a connected system, like a body. You can't just look at one part of the body and just fix that. You've got to understand that the lungs, the heart, the way the blood's flowing, everything is interconnected. And when we're looking at whole buildings and whole building energy simulation and everything, we're really looking at how these systems interconnect. And sometimes that can lead to whole different solutions that we never thought were possible to get to these goals we'll discuss, like path to net zero and architecture 2030, by maybe a super insulated, tighter envelope, a little more money spent on that. Maybe you can downsize your HVAC, or look at tying your HVAC to natural ventilation so it doesn't have to work so hard, or cut down your electric bills, your lighting costs because you use more daylight through these studies and through this modeling. And this is Reynolds School District. There was some publicity about this, so we can kind of talk about the results of this. But Reynolds School District, my little sis with big brothers, big sisters went there, low income. It was a struggling school district, and we started to go through this process, and they didn't understand that it was possible to achieve these energy goals in the budget constraints they were experiencing. And we said, let's just do the charrette and see what's possible and put everything on the table and use this iterative design process with all these different disciplines, problem solving, to see if we can get there. And through that process, really kickstarted with the eco charrette, with the engineer talking to the architect, talking to the owner, talking to the facility managers. There were so many great solutions that came about, especially with passive design that saved money, and just really best practices that they were able to achieve Architecture 2030 in a budget they didn't think was even possible. So it's just a really great kind of inspirational story on sustainability and equity. And I think these eco charrettes really kickstart that. And VJ, my Owami friend, knows I talk about that subject a lot. So just great inspiration to kickstart things for this Energy Trust of Oregon whole building early design mock charrette. Ellen, I'll pass to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Heather, and excuse me, Summer. And that was a really fun experience with Reynolds. And we do have some case study information at Energy Trust we can share. We did some blogs, so if anyone would like to see those, we're happy to share those. So Energy Trust we're an independent nonprofit organization. And we serve customers of Portland General Electric, Pacific Power, Northwest Natural, Cascade Natural, and Avista Natural Gas. And we are funded through those ratepayers through their utility bills. And really our goal is to provide access to affordable energy and renewable power opportunities throughout Oregon and Southwest Washington. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So we are here today to talk about this Multnomah County building that is going through our whole building incentive offering. And this is just an overview of all the different incentives that contribute towards our whole building pathway. So the first one is this meeting we're here today. It's the early design assistance. And the incentive is $5,000, but we're able to offer an extra $500 to have Nathan here as our commissioning agent, and then another $500 to have Joe here as our solar trade ally. So we're able to offer the full $6,000 incentive that for this project. And we are going to be hearing from Joe in a little bit. He'll talk a little more about the different solar opportunities that are available through both kind of feasibility studies and planning, as well as the solar panels themselves. So looking forward to hearing that. We also, Summer mentioned, we support technical assistance. So we will cover 60% up to $40,000 for daylighting studies, for the passive system studies, and for energy modeling that Brian's going to help talk about it in a little bit. And other studies. You know, this is a chance for the design team to be kind of innovative. So if you see an opportunity that could save money through the design, or if you want to kind of harness an opportunity for a system, let us know. Talk about it with us, and we can run it by our engineers to see if it could be potentially rolled into this pot of 40,000. We've had a few other opportunities. One that came up in another project is an exterior screen study. They wanted to look at some shading opportunities for the exterior of the south side of the building, and wanted to do some kind of a robust study, and we were able to help them with that. So definitely, I challenge the team to think of ways that we can help with that design process. And then we take the results of the energy model And we assign, based on the kilowatt hour and therm savings, we assign an incentive amount to it. So at 5% or more efficient than code, that would be our whole building. And we look at 25 cents a kilowatt hour, 80 cents a therm. However, if the project is able to achieve the kind of higher threshold of savings for architecture 2030 and achieve the path to net zero level, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that is in a little bit, we're able to offer a higher incentive of 40 cents a kilowatt hour and $1.20 a therm. If the project team is looking at putting in advanced metering, maybe that's something that rolls up to the building system. Maybe it's a dashboard that tracks the solar performance. All those kinds of things we can help at 50% of the cost up to 20,000. And then if the building gets all the way to zero and would like to certify with the International Living Future Institute, we're able to help offset $2,000 of the certification cost. So that's kind of our suite that we offer projects going through the whole building like this one. So thank you so much. I think I'll hand it back to Summer. Oh, first of all, any questions for me? All right. Summer, back to you.
Thanks, Ellen. And don't be shy. These incentives are not hard to attain, especially that early design assistance to do this charrette. This is a no risk money situation. I'd like to reiterate that point. Seems too good to be true to some owners. This is really how we like to look at the process and the discussion today in this eco charrette, is looking at the most kind of cost-effective solutions, how we first reduce demand in our building. I talked a little bit about adding insulation, better windows, looking at the program, a lot about building orientation. VJ already started to talk about that, how you deal with your natural resources. That leads you to this kind of passive design system type of conversation where you're looking at natural ventilation, daylighting, what opportunities are there. Wonder if you put vertical versus horizontal louvers on the outside. Like Ellen mentioned, there's incentives to study that type of daylighting and shading systems, how you get light deeper into the system, into the building. And then starting to talk about how that interweaves and interacts with our active systems. So maybe you have great natural daylighting, and so you can have a lighting design system that actually dims down when you have enough natural light and is reactive. Same with maybe natural ventilation. You have a HVAC system that will actually shut down the ventilation when you have enough natural ventilation going on. All these things kind of interact with each other, and they kind of build upon each other. Then you start to look at considering behavior. You know, can you have a wider delta of temperature? Depends on what type of building it is. We've done some buildings where trauma-informed design is more important in keeping a very specific temperature. Some office buildings can say, hey, let's put on our sweaters, and don't mind a green light system for when to open windows for kind of a manual educational type of natural ventilation. So making sure you engage your occupants to whatever degree you can, integrating that with operations and maintenance is all incredibly important, especially for the long-term performance of a building. And then looking at renewables. So we have our solar trade ally here today that's going to talk about solar systems and great synergies there that can help us get to our goals. So speaking of goals, this is the metric that is used for the Path to Net Zero program for Energy Trust. Is the Architecture 2030 Challenge, something that's near and dear to the AIA as well. It's kind of a global goal, I think, at this point, to really look at how we can decrease our carbon usage to get to net zero. Starting, we are at 80% today. So this is kind of showing our path of getting there. I've been doing this since before 2010. So it's 80% got here fast. And so 90% is going to be here fast as well. So we really need to be thinking ahead. So it's really about looking at these goals and seeing what's possible. This seems unachievable, I think, in most conversations at the beginning of a project. But in my experience, I've gone through dozens of projects through this process, and we've been able to attain this goal where we did not think it was possible. And once again, it was really looking at that process of reducing demand, passive systems, how that interacts with active systems, and using this iterative integrative design process, we've been able to achieve that. So that is what we're looking at today, that 80% reduction. I will emphasize that that 80% reduction is compared to the national CBEX baseline, not compared to Oregon code. Oregon code is probably getting you almost halfway there. Brian can attest to that more specifically than me, but you are getting, you're making huge strides just by our Washington, Oregon, even California energy codes are way past what that baseline is. So it's 80% reduction compared to the national baseline, which is a little easier than it sounds if you haven't dealt with that CBEX baseline before. So today we used the Zero tool. So Ellen mentioned that there's some synergy with International Living Future Institute's Zero certification. It's also the tool you use to set your EUI target, your energy use intensity target. And it's a free tool that you just go to the Zero tool, and you need very basic information about building type and square footage and use. And it's going to pump out what we have today to discuss, which is this 11 kBTU per square foot per year target for our EUI. That is what our goal is, and that includes solar. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And that's what this chart of numbers starts to discuss, is you have this estimated building energy consumption, and then you can start talking about how much renewable energy do you need to get down to that number. We saw for this project that it is possible with some energy efficiency measures and renewable energy that we could get to that goal. And so that really makes the discussion interesting today for this charrette. All right. This is an example of a Menti poll. Do we have a live one we are going to start up, or should I just discuss this one?
We do. So Priya,
Let me
hand it over to you.
Get that. And
there's a fun tool.
yeah, I think do we have share the QR code, Ellen, or the
we did. It looks like it may have not made it in here after all. So
okay.
Maybe you could put in the chat.
Great. Let me get that. I'll put that in the chat, and then right now open it up, and then let's have a chance to play. Let me share my screen.
Summer has to stop sharing. There we go.
There we go. Okay, so are you guys being able to see the Menti right now? All right, one person's already there. So here's a example of using this in a charrette, but here's an actually really good question. Please select the best option based on your personal experience with charrettes. A number of you are writing. Vijay, you said something about how useful these can be. A number of people are saying it's a great way to get people together and discuss, as Summer said, options that you didn't even know you had. So right now I attend charrettes all the time whenever I can, which I think we have a number of people in this Zoom call that are those people that go to every single one and have expertise. Maybe a few of you attend a few. It's maybe a quarterly thing that comes your way. It's okay if you've never attended. This is why we're putting the mock charrette training together with the Energy Trust and AIA Oregon. And if you've never heard of it before, you are in the right place, because having the opportunity to hear from experts that have done it, some of their best practices, is a great way to have some exposure. So we have 25 people. I think we have maybe 50 on the Zoom call. So let's give it a little chance to tick away. It seems right now that lovely, would you call that chartreuse? Rose color?
Rose. I'd go with rose.
Rose. Rose is the right color. Seems like a number of us have attended a few, but could really use more best practices. Some of the best ways these have worked for the expert players on the Zoom call. So,
and Kriya,
yeah.
Kriya, could you maybe talk to just the value of a poll like this that you see kind of in a setting like this?
Yeah, especially, and this is good for everyone. I know we have a number of engineers and architects. Sometimes having something where we have to have it online, it can be challenging to keep everyone engaged, right? The opportunity to maybe sneak away and take a look at our emails as they're piling up is a pretty big draw. So this is a way that we use in our training and education series to keep people interested, engaged, and also this team might change a little bit of the way they approach things if they see we have 9 people that have never attended a charrette before. So it helps us in real time tailor some of our learning content for those people showing up to today saying, wait, this is brand new for me. Take me through the basic steps as well. So that's how we do it. And thank you all for playing along, taking some of these polls. And I hope you can use it too as mentee, or I know Zoom has polling options within the tool. I knew if you're using GoToWebinar, it has it in there. So feel free to use some of these learning tools to better understand who's at your meeting. And sometimes we assume the level of information they have. This is a great way to make sure we leave no one behind in a charrette.
Thank you, Kriya. And thank you, everyone. And again, please feel free to add comments or thoughts in the chat. We absolutely want to see those and make sure that we're covering those. And I did just want to ask again, if anyone has thoughts around virtual or in-person meetings, things you've seen that worked well, or maybe you have you just want to air a grievance about one or the other. We'd love to know your thoughts, because that helps us as professionals as well as today. So thank you.
And it looks like, Ellen, someone did say poll is what we use to create word clouds as a fun way to get feedback, which is another, maybe at the end, how did this charrette feel for you? Did you get some new ideas? Did this open a discussion? So I love the idea. Word cloud is great for that.
Yes, thank you.
Kriya, I think I would just add a comment to Ellen's point. I think the technology is still allowing us to meet on digital platforms like this. Yes, of course, there are some drawbacks of not having that personal connection.
Right.
But we are talking about saving fuel, saving energy, saving everything, aren't we? So that many 60 cars here right now, gathering someplace, look at the cost of that and the time cost.
Right.
So as the years go by, this is going to get better. And maybe there are some beer opportunities sometime to get meet, once in a while, about these, just kidding. But at the same time, I think it certainly serves the purpose of, having this digital platform. It's consistent with the goals, what we are discussing in general.
That is such a great point. Yeah, thank you, Vijay. Well said. It's good to know. And also to your point, it's good to know when can we use a virtual format? And then when is it really better served to be in person? Having that mix of options.
Very true.
It's great. So thank you for the good input. Ellen, I'll hand it back to you.
All right, and I'll kick it over, lob it over to Summer again as our facilitator. Thank you.
Great, thanks guys. Yeah, that's fun. I love these tools, and we actually use the poll in our report at the end that you submit to Energy Trust, and we end up going back to it, saying, what were the goals? Did you really think daylighting was a priority? Did you really, you voted on it, you get buy-in right in the beginning. Some things that are quickly pushed off the table later, you say, but wait a minute, we said this is important to us when everybody was in the same room. So there's a lot of power to these graphs. So we put them in a document that lives forever. They don't just go away. Okay. Back to it. So now we're going to get into the energy section. Let me know if I have any internet issues, because I think I forgot to turn off my video. So just chime in if I need to go do that. So we start with this kind of shoebox energy modeling. So even if you're really in early conceptual design, you want to do this in your schematic design phase. So this is very early massing to really look at daylight opportunities, wind, natural ventilation, look at community factors, really start with that early shoebox modeling. There's a lot of tools to do this. I think Brian is going to speak to just kind of how we start to go through this process.
Yeah, thanks, Summer. Yeah, so here we've created a shoebox energy model, like you mentioned, really kind of an early simplified version of the building that can still help kind of inform some of these big picture early decisions with some energy use feedback. And so here we've analyzed the baseline mechanical system, so dedicated outdoor air system, DX cooling, gas-fired heating, and then heat pumps for zone heating. And so you can see the EUI there, 39, which really just expresses that energy use intensity or energy use index on a per square foot basis for the building. And then on the right, we've kind of broken that down to all the different end uses to really, it really helps kind of identify the areas that are going to be best to target the biggest energy users, and things like lighting, HVAC, that sort of thing. Some of the smaller stuff, it's, yes, you could save some of that, but it's not really time or money well spent necessarily. We can make a bigger impact elsewhere. And then here, just kind of continuing with that analysis. So we've got the efficiency of the dedicated outdoor air system, along with the heat pumps. And really we're looking at throughout the course of the year, every month, you can see graphed here the energy use and the fuel type, as we go through. Obviously you got more heating in the winter, and then as we move through the year. So that kind of helps us look at how that energy use breaks down, and where are some of the biggest chunks or biggest opportunities for savings. And so typically when we analyze mechanical system options, especially from an energy standpoint, also just from a system selection standpoint, we'll compare them to that baseline system. And so this is the first option, or first alternative. And so the first one we looked at is a dedicated outdoor air system with electric heat and then zone heat pumps to do the space conditioning. You can see the EUI here, pretty similar to the baseline case, and then kind of the breakdown again of how that shakes out. Okay, and then case 2, so it's kind of a similar approach, still a dedicated outdoor air system that we're looking at with VRF for the zone, the space conditioning, the heating and cooling. So again, we're seeing that EUI drop a little bit, so definitely kind of moving in the right direction, but that's again, one of the options that we're looking at. Yeah, and then next slide. Then case 3 is more of a traditional VAV, or variable air volume system, that we looked at. And so package DX cooling, electric heat in the air handler, and then electric reheat in the terminal units downstream. Quite a high EUI there at 71. So I think we can kind of rule that one out pretty quickly, but it's great to kind of look at that up front and just, make sure we've checked the box to analyze that.
So Brian, just jumping in with a question. So that 39, was that the code baseline, or was that because 11 was the path net zero. So is 39 the code baseline? So technically case 3 would be exceeding code. Is that how I'm reading this?
Well, that's the baseline system EUI. So if we have a mechanical system that matches this baseline description, that's where it stands. So it's kind of just giving us a point to compare against. But yeah, typically that would be in most cases, that would be a code baseline. And then here, just kind of the summary of each one of those. You can see the electricity and natural gas usage depending on the system option. A lot of projects now, of course, are going fossil fuel free, and so it may be helpful to analyze that, just from a baseline standpoint. But definitely, of course, trying to go all electric wherever we can, certainly on new projects. And so you can see case 1 and 2 really kind of winning out so far in this analysis. And then here, the next few slides, we just got kind of some diagrammatic representation. So it's kind of nice, not only from an energy use standpoint, but to also explain the mechanical system options to the owner. So the first one we looked at here is just pretty basic single zone gas-fired rooftop unit. And it illustrates how that supplies the heats and cools the space. And then some of the pros and cons here you see on the left. Pretty low cost, pretty simple. But not a great lifespan from an equipment standpoint. So definitely things that the owner needs to think about. And also really important factors in the life cycle cost analysis too, when we compare all these system options. And then next is basically the same system, but switching to a heat pump. So electric only, no natural gas use. So a lot of the same pros and cons that you can see there on the left. But of course, getting away from fossil fuel use, which of course is really important. Next slide. And so here is the traditional VAV system, large rooftop air handler, and then zone terminal units. Works well from a zoning standpoint. You can use as many terminal units as you need downstream to heat and cool the spaces, but large ductwork, they tend to be pretty noisy. Fairly intensive from an energy use standpoint. So you can kind of see some of the negatives that would probably steer us away from this one in this case. And then finally, VRV, or a lot of times called a VRF system. So refrigerant-based system, heat pump system. Those systems do have the option for heat recovery. So that's one thing that we looked at to see if we could find opportunities in the building for let's say interior zones that might want cooling, and then perimeter zones that want heating, and that the system can recover that and really enhance the energy efficiency of the building. And then you see some of the pros and cons there. Very flexible from a zoning standpoint. A lot of different options for fan coils, ducted, non-ducted. So really we see this one win on a lot of projects. Yeah, and then here's just kind of a summary of those. Yeah, next slide. So this was a poll that we took, and really to get real-time feedback from the folks in the charrette. And so it's a great way to get a good snapshot of, based on their own experiences and some of the info that we've discussed, kind of which way people are leaning, or which way they, or which preferences they have for a mechanical system.
Brian, we did have a question from
that
was put in the chat about what kind of wall assemblies and windows building envelope do you assume with these energy models? Do you work with the architect to ensure that those align with the thermal performance of the building components?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question.
Good
Absolutely.
question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Early on, we would typically go with a code assembly, building envelope assembly, just to kind of, the shoebox model, like I said, is kind of a quick, simplified version, or at least kind of a start of the energy model that we'll ultimately use for the project. So starting with code assembly, especially in Oregon, we have a great energy code here, and so using even those baseline code assemblies, it's still a pretty beefy envelope. It's still a nice performing envelope. So that's a good starting point. And then we'll absolutely work with your architect, present different envelope options, help analyze those and see, what's going to make most sense. Do we invest, money in better glazing or better roof insulation, things like that, and really help them find that point of diminishing returns too, where you're just kind of throwing dollars at, very small incremental improvements that might, that money might be well spent on other areas of the building.
So Brian, oh, sorry, Heather, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just add from providing the architect's perspective, and especially when we're having these early design meetings, we'll often, even before we get into this section, we left it out for time today, but we'll show a typical building section and according to code, and if we're far enough along that we have some other options that we're already looking at, we'll include that. But a lot of times this is so early in the process, we haven't gotten there yet.
Right.
Yeah. So I would agree with what Brian said, that that's kind of the process that we follow, starting with the code assumption and then seeing how we can improve on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely want to work with the architect as early as possible and start looking at those different options and what's going to make sense.
Yeah, and Brian, I was just going to ask if you could comment on the role that kind of that technical assistance that Energy Trust offers, how that plays into kind of helping make some of these decisions.
Yeah, no, I think the technical assistance incentives are huge. I mean, that's, a lot of times that can really help to pay for, a large portion or most of the cost of the energy modeling effort. And so I think especially for owners that, they're looking at the budget and looking at their funding and, does it make sense to spend that money on a model and going after bigger incentives, they can be on the fence. And so that can really help tip the balance of that, help pay for those upfront efforts that, can really lead to a lot bigger savings. And then just operational savings, of course, for the life of the building.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Ellen, because I think it really does change the conversation. Brian did a great job of, making the point about life cycle assessment, looking at these things for the life of the building and when you get those paybacks. And if you don't have that and you start going into the value engineering process, so many of these things just get pushed off the table when really they could have saved the owner a lot of money in the end and been a huge cost saver if it was looked at holistically and over the life of the building. So it really incentivizes you to use that process and that information to make educated decisions.
Yep, that's a good point.
Cool, great.
Excellent. Well, we better keep rolling.
All right, I'll just segue us into renewable energy, just saying a couple things, Oregon Department of Energy, there's a state requirement for 1.5% of your total contract price being spent on green energy technology. So there's kind of some synergy with these public projects looking at solar, doing a solar feasibility study. And then it also helps us reach that Architecture 2030 goal. So you can look at a lot of different ways. It could be for EV charging. It could help with the building. We want to look at it in all different ways. It could be integrated with your facade, the roof. So I'll pass it to our Solar Trade Ally to speak to that further.
All right, thank you, Summer. Hello, everyone. I'm Joe, once again, Solar Trade Ally here for this. We as Solar Trade Allies, we love these things.
Whoops, Joe, you went on mute. There you go.
I went on mute. All right, am I back? All right. Sorry about that. See, that happens in Charette, so that's what's so cool about it.
That just means
shows how human we are. Anyway, I appreciate being involved in this. We do, as Solar Trade Allies, we really do like being involved in this. It does allow us to kind of talk about solar with people, and what's nice is you guys basically get paid to have us there too. So it's or project owners do so, and you can learn a lot. So really the main goal of these things is one of it is to educate customers, and so they can make intelligent buying decisions. That's kind of one of the goals of our company and one of the goals of these things. So because to a lot of people, this is new. I mean, everybody has to have a heating system. Everybody has to know what lights do and all that. People don't really understand how a PV system a lot of times works. And as trade allies, we got to kind of read the room, but a lot of times give like a solar 101. This is how net metering works. this is what you can expect out of your system. This is how long it should last. So it's kind of something where I'll go through, and I won't go through all that today, but kind of give kind of a breakdown on how solar works and net metering and the different policies based on different utilities and that sort of thing. It's also good opportunities for us to talk about incentives out there. We are fortunate enough to have federal tax credits. The Energy Trust of Oregon, partnering with that organization, has really helped move solar in Oregon, at least, and really kind of they do incentivize it, and so that is something not only with education but with actual real money. So that's something we'll talk a little bit about. It's also a good opportunity for us to learn about the project. It lets us meet a lot of times, the mechanical folks, the energy modeling. A lot of times the electrical engineer will be there, full MEP, and along with the architect. And so it allows us to figure out, okay, what are the goals of the customer, and a lot about the building. So that's kind of what this slide goes over. The Energy Trust of Oregon, there's a solar feasibility study rebate where they will actually reimburse you up to 90% up to $1,800. So that kind of helps. And what that allows us to do and for the customers to receive a kind of a report in a basic broad outline of what a system will look like, the components, and the financials behind it. And so what that it's a good way for depending on budgeting, if for customers to see if that's something that they can afford and that it's in the budget. And then also there is a installation rebate, which is right now, I think with Energy Trust, up to $18,000 off the cost of the system. And so that is something that has been really a big help with the state in getting solar going, and it does move around. It has shrunk over the years, but so has the cost of solar. So that's good. The federal tax credit, 30%. For public projects, that used to be really kind of a non-starter, but with this new this new bill passed this past summer called the Inflation Reduction Act, which is curiously titled, but it's basically an environmental bill. And then what that does is it does allow, there is verbiage in there that allows like a government agency or a nonprofit that doesn't have a tax liability to be able to monetize that. So that's huge. I mean, that's almost a third of the cost of the system. There's also makers, which is basically federal depreciation benefits. And there are some grants out there. The Oregon Department of Energy has some community resiliency grants that if you do represent a project that is publicly funded, I really recommend looking into that. A lot of money there for that. Pacific Power does have some blue sky grants. PGE has their version of them. And if you're in a rural area, like out here in Central Oregon, there is some USDA REAP grants is what they're called. So, the key takeaways that we grab from an energy charrette is basically for the solar trade ally. So what kind of roof is there? What is the electrical service? Those kind of details, a lot of the technical details. Also energy modeling, figuring out, okay, how much power is this building estimated to use? So we can kind of outline, hey, a solar array may cover 100%, we have the ability to go net zero, cover 100%, or we could cover 50%, but that's a good, a good metric for people to know. Also looking at the utility allows us to get ahead of it and see what kind of capacity there is at the utility level. Not all, feeders and, substations have the capacity for these large systems that can come online. So it allows you to find that out at the front end and not get surprised way down the line. And then also allows us to find out the goals of the customer. What is their budget? What is their tax liability? What are their financial goals? That sort of thing. So we're not wasting anybody's time, and we get those answers. Summer mentioned the 1.5% green energy technology. That is something that is actually in the state of Oregon. If you are a publicly funded by taxpayer money build and project, you are required to use 1.5% of the total funds for renewable energy on site. Not everybody does this, but there is that is in the statute. So that's something that we encourage people to look at in their budgeting, and so that's great. As far as roof mount PV arrays, there's a whole bunch of different types. This is just some examples. The most on the right, you'll see that flush mount roof system. That's the the best, basically the most standard. It is the best bang for the buck. But on these larger commercial buildings, you will see these flat roofs. So there's different. The ballasted system is probably the most cost-effective solution, but also very hard to do in the Portland with the they're very concerned about seismic. So Portland and Los Angeles are renowned for really having a hard time getting a ballasted system through. So there are other options. You can see there's tilt ups, and so there are other options out there, and that's your trade ally will kind of line you out what would be the best for your building. And there's also, you can get really creative. These are green roof integrated PV. There's awnings. There's awnings over windows. There's those sort of things. Carports are a good way to do it. All these are great. We've done, covered walkways for customers that are, say, hey, we want to use this 1.5% and, do something kind of with a dual purpose. They do cost more, so you do give up energy, and capacity. So it's, but sometimes it's the only solution. Sometimes the roof won't work for whatever reason. And so these are kind of neat ways to incorporate solar into the project.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. That was super cool.
Yeah.
Any closing comment before we move on to the next section?
No, I just Heather outlined that, I kind of uploaded some documents that shows what you can expect, including, as far as from a solar feasibility study. If you're interested, you can look there. That's just kind of but it kind of gives you an outline of the materials used, the pricing, and overall the project, the energy benefits, the environmental benefits. Those are the kind of things that people want to know, and so that's what you would see in much more detail when somebody had time to put that together and really dive into the project.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, I think we're going to try to share stuff after this meeting because you provided a lot of great info. Appreciate that. And it's such good info to get right in schematic design, including that 1.5% for green energy technology. It's if your total solar resource fraction, Joe might mention this, is over 75. And you only know that if you do a solar feasibility study. And so you want this information right up front. And then if you are doing it, where's the best solar access? If you are thinking green roof, it's not an either or thing. The evapotranspiration, the cooling of the PV panels can actually be good synergy. So starting that conversation early is so important. And our next section is all about that integrated design process. So feel free to add things into the chat. This is kind of prepping us for an interactive exercise that we don't have time for today, but we'll show you how we'd frame that discussion, one example at least of how we would do it in a charrette. So we're all going to kind of chime in to talk about these various things. I think we talk quite a bit about solar, but resiliency is a huge conversation on these projects. And I love sustainability and resiliency being in tandem, because talking about being self-sustaining, keeping that power you generate from PV on site with battery storage, having a rainwater harvesting system that's flushing your toilets, these very basic necessities for a building can become community centers when things do go down. In addition to, being a self-sustained building for their own operations. I know some public agencies are really looking at how they can provide these benefits to the community by having the best ventilation systems, by being self-sufficient when, maybe power goes out or, water's not accessible. So resiliency, being future ready, is a big topic, and ETO and these charrettes really help you think about being future ready right from the beginning of a project. And speaking of being future ready, think about the long-term operations of a building, measurement verification, dashboards, really using them as educational tools for people. This is right in the lobby of a building saying live monitoring, what's being produced by the PV, you know, how the control system is contributed. There's a lot you can actually interact with this particular display. It's a touch screen. So if you're interested in water, electricity, you can see how the building's performing and what strategies they did to do that and how many therms or how much money it's saving per year. If it's a school, it can be how many, you know, buses is that equivalent to taking off the road. It's a really fun way to share things in addition to saving money in your long-term operations and maintenance. And this example of an educational tool, and I'll move on to our commissioning agent. Yeah, Ellen.
Yeah, and Summer, I'll just jump in and mention this is the perfect example of what I was mentioning earlier for the incentives for the metering. So advanced metering can play a part in creating those awesome dashboards.
That's so great. And then, you know, you can really react to when you're seeing peak times. You can interact with educating tenants to actually lower that cost or in your operational strategies. All right, so we'll have a moment on commissioning here from our commissioning agent.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks, Summer. So as part of this mock charrette here, Eric and the owner team, who I am a representative of throughout this whole project, had mentioned that the facility team was really hoping to get some really good back-end data so that we're going through this eco charrette here, figuring out where we're trying to hit, where we're headed as far as EUI. And then at the end of this project, we really want to be able to show proof that we've made it. And so I'm going to be leading the charge for Eric and his team. And as part of this project, we want to be able to communicate that through this pre-design period, through design, into construction, all the way up through occupancy, so that these energy goals that we're talking about today can really be captured in a meaningful and thoughtful way, so that when Eric and his team look at this building down the road, we can capture this data and show, you know, where we can improve or where we may have missed the boat. And that all kind of starts soon. So that's one of the reasons why I'm here today, is to hopefully kick off that conversation with the team moving forward. And yeah, it's really important for us commissioning folks to get involved early, because we get to be at the table to be able to kind of lead some of these discussions that we'll need to carry through all the way to the end of the project for the facilities team that may not be able to be represented at the time. This is just another example here of something we'll do at the end of this project. So there's a couple of great resources. I'm sure some people are familiar with the Energy Star Portfolio Manager. That's the metric summary there at the bottom of the screen. That kind of shows you over time how your energy score is changing. And then it also breaks down your source EUI and site EUI. The other nice resource that we point to is the Building Performance Database, which is that top purple graph. It's the nation's largest data set of information. So that's another resource that we'll be using as the owner's representative to kind of benchmark this building as Brian's mechanical system kind of gets up and running, and we see how this building performs in real life as the PV system and everything starts to work. Thank you, Summer.
Thank you, Nathan. Yeah, commissioning agents can provide huge value, and the earlier the better for all this involvement, for sure. And I'll just mention synergy with LEED version 4. You know, there's much more emphasis on commissioning, more points assigned to it, and much more emphasis on monitoring over the life of the building. So that's really good to see that even across other certifications that we see even locally mandated, becoming more of a requirement.
For sure. And there's a lot of different ways to kind of meet that goal. And so it's really nice to be able to kind of have that conversation now, sooner the better, because you don't want to get to the end of your project and figure out how to do something that you know, you could have figured out now. So
exactly. Thanks, Nathan. That's great. Well, we're just going to kind of, this is meant to just set the stage for that integrative design process we were talking about. So I'm going to go kind of quickly through these slides just to kind of get you thinking about all these different topics. You know, we've talked a lot about energy efficiency. There is an agenda we can share that Energy Trust provides a template for, of all the energy efficiency measures and different ways of looking at those measures and discussion points we use for an exercise, but we also want to add in this kind of whole building approach and talk about air and water and sites. So just starting with air, there's of course a lot of synergy with air and those HVAC systems we talked about, dedicated outside air systems, natural ventilation. This is an example of kind of some well building components. You might bring in those synergies as well. That's something we always, whether you're going for well building certification or not, it's great to look at these other certifications, just add value when we've all become more aware during COVID times and these fires that, you know, our indoor environmental quality is really impacted, and looking at our ventilation systems, our air quality inside our buildings is incredibly important from the beginning. And the materials we bring into a building are incredibly important. They're constantly potentially emitting toxins into our building if you're not paying attention to low emitting materials. And we have our own tools like our Green Canary software that red flags things, but it's just really important to educate the team from the beginning on how to look for VOC reductions, low emitting materials in flooring, insulation, ceilings, adhesives, sealants, paints, coatings, not just to, if you're doing lead, point chase for one of these things, but really monitor everything's coming in the building, down to the subcontractors, providing some education, some templates, some tools to make them aware of how to spec these things. Heather, did you want to mention anything there?
No, we just jump into these next couple of ones just to continue this conversation about synergies. And so, you know, we're talking about energy today, but really at the end of the day, what we're talking about is carbon emissions. And so when we're looking holistically at materials, also considering the embodied carbon of those. And so if there's time in an eco charrette to discuss that, we really like to dive a little bit deeper, especially in the structural systems and how we can do that. And of course, looking at raw material sourcing, how far away does the products come from, and really understanding the health and environmental impacts in the supply chain and extraction processes. And then I also love to tie in biophilia if we can. If we have time to talk about that, you know, materials that are more natural tend to lend themselves to a more biophilic approach where we're really looking at how we design to help the occupants feel connected to nature. And with that lighting, so we're about to jump into some more daylighting and talking about lighting and how the circadian rhythm is supported by that, but not forgetting that things like dappled light, the joy of that, how that actually really helps with the wellness and happiness of occupants.
Nice. Thank you, Heather. That's great. And yeah, going into those lighting concepts, you do want to have a lighting designer present is such an important part of this, of really the indoor environmental quality of a space. And Heather mentioned daylighting being so good for your well-being, make you more productive, make it easier to concentrate, test scores go up in schools. It's really important, but also you can emulate that with lighting controls and different types of light color rendering. So not just efficiency, but once again, talk about efficiency and quality in the same conversation. So occupancy sensors, control systems, but looking at maybe how those daylight controls can be dynamic, reacting to that natural daylight as well. So harvest as much daylight as you can, and then maybe the lights dim as you go further into the building where the perimeter is getting enough light during the day, and there's sensors to react to that. And that's all playing off our circadian rhythm. You know, that's something where if you have a warmer light, it's more your time to wind down, to eat, that melatonin gets released. Blue light tells us it's daytime, it's time to be alert, time to go. And there's great LED systems now that can respond. You don't even necessarily see it. It's something that's just could be very subtle in the lighting to help you be attuned to your circadian rhythm. Daylight's the best, but there is and even with your paint systems, you can create this effect in certain rooms. If you want to have that in a place where you eat or a restaurant area, some of those candlelight restaurants, it's actually a technique to connect to our carnal instincts to be by a fire like a caveman and get hungry. So focus work increases with natural light. There's a lot of great statistics around this. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that.
I'll just jump in and say that, you know, this is something that would be incorporated into the energy modeling. So I don't know, Brian, if you could talk about how that contributes to lowering the EUI and how we can capture that in energy models.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, looking at the different lighting strategies, of course, I mean, it's kind of become standard practice, of course, to use LED lighting these days. But yeah, looking at daylight dimming, wherever we can, you know, help with the location of blazing, with the location of skylights to really take advantage of as much daylight as possible and dim or shut off interior lighting. That's definitely going to have a big impact on the energy consumption. So definitely something we want to talk about right up front and, you know, really get the feedback from the electrical engineer on what their plans are. And not only, you know, from the engineer, but also from the architect too, on some of the daylighting opportunities.
Right. So this is where in modeling, you could look at those vertical fins versus horizontal
Oh, yeah.
overhangs and how long and how often
Right.
a repetition and internal, you know, light shelves maybe, or even what paint you use.
Right. Yeah. Always recommend exterior sunshades wherever we can. So that's a good point.
Great. Yeah. Solar glare control. So if you have, you know, computers or, you know, you don't want to bring in light that's just going to create glare. It's all about that quality of light and ambient light you want to bring in. And somebody mentioned looking at window systems. You're ahead of us. Great point. You know, that's can be a huge point of letting in infiltration and be an issue. You could do all the right things. And if you have a single pane window system, you're going to be losing a lot of heat during the winter, and that's going to cost you a lot to run the building. So yeah, definitely look at double pane, triple pane, low E. In addition to those solar shading, you definitely want to look at what types of windows and doors and assemblies they're looking at in that thermal bridging. There's whole assessments that could be done with modeling just around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that this kind of touches on, I think, both of these slides on some of the points that Heather made earlier, just working with the architect early on before a lot of these decisions are made to help provide input, you know, from an energy use standpoint and from a heating and cooling standpoint, understanding comfort and heating and cooling loads and how these decisions impact that.
Absolutely. And you can have privacy, but still have like a north clerestory window letting in light and maybe reflecting on this. Maybe the angle of the roof has something to do with how this light's going to get deeper into a space. So it's definitely an integrated approach to this design process. And water, you know, heating and cooling water costs energy. So we definitely want to talk about water use reduction as well. There's rainwater harvesting systems. There's gray water reuse systems for toilet flushing or irrigation. You don't have to worry about the additional costs of a purple pipe system and all those additional code issues with bringing in the building, but just an irrigation system can be a great opportunity, or janitorial uses. I've even seen these tanks. This is kind of showcasing the education of how much water is in the system in a lobby, but it could be buried in a part of your fire suppression system as well. And for sustainable sites, you know, talking about not only our site, but the community around us, you know, how community garden could engage, be educational for your community or your tenants, bioswales for stormwater. I grew up on a houseboat on the Willamette River, so stormwater management is very near and dear to my heart. Green roof systems can be good for insulating the building, stormwater management, heat island reduction. So really talking about all that together and, you know, talk about the maintenance issues right up front. Having something that's a system that can be taken apart, a modular green roof system. There's a local product called Tough Stuff that doesn't need to be irrigated. So just making sure to talk about the life cycle assessment of these strategies is incredibly important. And this all plays into all these different whole building approaches. Can be a framework for LEED, or LEED could be the framework for that discussion, whether going for certification or not, to talk about sites, water, energy, materials, and indoor environmental quality in a whole holistic way. Well building really builds on that on the indoor environmental quality side of things. Living buildings, looking at those petals for net zero water or energy or materials, avoiding the red list. Coming up with your own matrix, your own approach, custom fit can really be a product at the end of these charrettes. So you really want to look beyond them, but they can be great metrics and baselines for how you have these discussions as well. talking about thermal comfort, lighting, acoustics, ergonomics, especially in well building, biophilia, as Heather discussed. There's such a huge array in that discussion. It's not just about green walls, it's about water features and daylighting and how you use wood in a space and natural, even emulating natural fibers and materials, even if they're just a painting. So there's a lot of different ways to do that, and indoor air quality, of course, as well. So we are ending that portion a little later than expected. I'm sure my technical difficulty did not help with that, so I apologize. But I will just end on the note before we break out into just open discussion on, we would break out into exercise at this point. We usually do it actually a couple times during a longer shred. So if you're going for 3 hours or more, it might be a midway exercise we would do. So I have 2 examples here that we can share. I'll just quickly show them here. So this is really trying to, oops, sorry about that. In person, we love to use big whiteboards and templates and sticky notes and break out into the groups. So this is, Miro is a great example of how to use those sticky notes to get an interactive discussion going. So if people don't want to speak up, it's a way to get your ideas out. This is one exercise about sites and water and energy and all those different topics, break out into groups, and then we present on each subject. There's some example strategies over here in case you don't want to write your own post-it, you can just pull them over. So like solar ready, offsite renewable energy, daylighting, natural ventilation, very high level things just to discuss and show what our priority or what are strategies, opportunities, challenges, and synergies. In this, I'll just quickly run through this because this is actually each section of the ETO agenda you want to make sure you cover. Reduce envelope loads, incorporating passive solutions, designing efficient systems, considering occupant behavior and plug loads, using renewables, operations and maintenance, life cycle analysis, electrical vehicle charging, and climate resiliency. So you can easily write on these post-it notes, create your own comments about each one of these things, and pros and cons. Once again, this is the time where you put all your grievances down. You can say, I hate wireless urinals, they stink. And then somebody else can say, well, if you clean them right, they don't. And it's a great place to banter, and don't be shy and get everything on the table very early in the design process. And once again, this feeds into our reports at the end of the day that are living documents that can be referenced throughout the project. So I do have agenda examples up, reports, if there are any questions, but I'll just leave it open to open discussion at this point and see what comes up.
Yeah, so, since we're so close to time, I'll throw out, if anyone on the call today has specific questions, please feel free to email me. I think my information is out there, and here, I'll put it in the chat. Feel free to email me, and I can call on our team of experts today, and we'll make sure we get your question answered, since we ended up kind of slim on Q&A. So thanks for bearing with us. And please do reach out, and I want to make sure that we get your questions answered, as well as just if you want to share best practices, we'd love to hear that as well. So please do let us know.
Summer, there was one question here that I thought really related to where you're at the Miro board that I wanted to make sure we addressed. It's a cost-informed decision-making, and it's where there's budget constraints that may inform the order of priority for each of these options. The person was thinking about complex decision-making process to maximize performance and value. I know we heard from a number of people, life cycle, is this a place that you see that pop up?
Yeah.
And how do you address that?
Absolutely. I think it's, and this is why it's great. And Eric has great experience with this with the county, where facility managers are involved saying, this is really expensive to operate, or we've seen problems with this control system that maybe as a designer or sustainability consultant like myself, we may think sounds great. It can give us a real world perspective, the budget concerns over the life of it, not just upfront. Or they might say this costs more upfront, but we've seen this save so much energy costs. We do want to look at it. This is absolutely where you throw all that on the table and have really open and honest discussions. I think that's why I like these meetings so much, is there you can say everything and nothing's the wrong answer at this point, and you want to get it out. Opportunities and challenges both equally.
Sure. And as an owner, I would say that, on your first one, you may not be as prepared, but on your second and third and exponentially thereafter, you know how to budget better for designing a building of this nature.
Yeah, it's a learning experience, right? I think we all learn from each other. Like I've probably learned more from Eco Charrettes than any green build conferences, 5 years architecture school. I mean, I think it keeps me on my toes. The questions do, hearing the real world perspective, the case studies, the grievances, it really is educational, I think, for everybody, which is what makes it valuable.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, a very valuable tool is that energy modeler and the modeling. It allows you to think through if then scenarios just time and time again before you spend a lot of time designing things. So it helps you make those informed decisions.
I'd like to jump in and add that a lot of we discovered through the early analysis in preparation for this workshop, and then through discussion, the areas that we want to go back and study more. And that's also where the incentives can be great, because since they're for more, they include energy modeling, but then there's also additional studies for additional daylighting and ventilation studies, that sort of thing. And so a lot of the value that I think as architects and for the team that we get out of these is what to do next and what to study more.
Absolutely. And, I just want to say that I think we all think these are really fun. That's something we were joking about when we were putting this together and volunteering our time. We're like, this is a good time for us. So I just do want to emphasize, use this as a resource. Ellen, please share emails. I know that at least goes for me, and I'm happy just to discuss things or share tools and things that might help you in your own discussion. Number one thing you can do to have the most sustainable building, the most cost-effective way possible, using ETO incentives to their fullest. Get that free money. That's my last word.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you joining today. And please do reach out if you have questions later. This is an amazing panel today. Thank you guys for your time, and really appreciate everyone's thoughts today. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye, everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.